Chris Mannix for the crossover alongside Howard Beck and Ben Pickman. Guys, the Trailblazers season is over. A disappointing first-round exit at the hands of the Denver Nuggets. And now the subject turned to the future of Damian Lillard, Portland's franchise player. In 9 seasons with the Blazers, Portland's never advanced past the Western Conference Finals and only got that far just once. So, Howard, I'll ask you, is it time for Portland to move on from Damian Lillard?
The answer is no, but no with some qualifiers. If Damian Lillard himself decides he's going to abandon his years of saying, I want to stick it out here, I want to be loyal to Portland, and it's time to move me, then yes, of course. If he wants to be moved, you do him that courtesy and find the best deal. But voluntarily, for the Blazers to give up one of the best players in the league, a guy who was flirting with the MVP race all year, no, not time yet. Listen, they have had disappointments, but it was only 2 years ago that this team won 53 games, was in the conference finals. They've had a lot of bad injury luck. Nurkic, Zach Collins, multiple times with both. And I'm not saying that this roster, as it stands, is good enough to satisfy that organization or Dame Lillard. But I think you got to at least give this team or give Dame a chance to have a fortified roster around him. Look to upgrade around him first before you go and hit the nuclear option.
And I think Howard hits on that key point at the very end, and it's why I agree with him. No, they shouldn't trade him right now. I think you have to look to retool this roster first before you look to retool this star player who was in the MVP conversation, right? We've already seen changes at the head coach front with Terry Stotts now out as the head coach. They'll be bringing in someone new next year, and I think you again have to wonder CJ McCollum's long-term future with the Portland Trailblazers, Yusuf Nurkic, who averaged a career low, 24 minutes per game this year. There's questions about his fit, of course. We've seen them trade for Robert Covington this past offseason. They gave up a first-round pick. They gave up some draft capital to get him, but still you can wonder, is he really a long-term option for that team? And a lot of the young players that for so long were touted in Portland, Zach Collins, Anthony Simons, they're not developing the way I think a lot of people expected. But still, I think you have to look to retool the roster, move some of those players along if you can before you give up on Damian Lillard. He's the kind of guy that every single team in the league would want. I don't understand trading him at this point, especially if he doesn't want out himself.
Well, you guys act like the Blazers haven't been retooling the roster over the last few years. They made a whole bunch of deals in this past offseason to bring in guys that are wing defenders like a Robert Covington. So what you're telling me is that maybe interchanging some pieces, maybe dealing CJ McCollum, getting Zach Collins back healthy, is that going to push this team over the top? Look, I'm a big believer that being proactive is better than being reactive. And maybe that's because I saw the results up close and personal of what being proactive means. In Boston, where the Celtics back in 2013 were at the end of the line with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and Rajon Rondo. They could have kept that group together. They could have let Paul Pierce retire as a Celtic, but they saw the writing on the wall. They saw that this was only a first round or second round and done type of team. So they blew the whole thing up, and they got major draft capital back in return, draft capital that has put the team in position to where it is right now with an all-NBA player in Jason Tatum, an all-star in Jaylen Brown, and some decent young talent around them. Damian Lillard, I think, has a window. He's 30 years old. Still top 5, 7, whatever you want to put him, players in the league. Might continue to be that for a season or two. But we saw some signs of wearing down this year, didn't we? He was nicked up in the second half of the season. And as his game goes on, and as that contract keeps getting bigger and bigger, it's going to become, I think, more and more difficult to deal Damian Lillard, at least in terms of getting back high value back in return. Right now, you put Damian Lillard on the market, he's one of, if not the most appealing trade asset we've seen in a generation. You would have teams lining up to make big, big offers to go and get him. I'm just not so sure that those offers are going to be there a year from now or another year after that when Lillard is 32 years old and he's looking at a $50+ million salary in 2025. It's brutal to look to trade a player that has done as much for Damian Lillard, as much for the city, as Damian Lillard has done for Portland. But if you're a general manager, your job is to be cold-blooded. You have got to make tough decisions. So if I'm Neil Olshey, it's almost basketball malpractice to not at least explore what you can get back, Howard, in return for Damian Lillard?
Explore maybe, but actually aggressively try to trade him. I'm not there yet, Chris. And listen, Dame Lillard is not KG and Paul Pierce in 2012, 2013. Like, those guys were on clear decline in their mid 30s at the time that the Celtics offloaded them for that bushel of draft picks. Dame Lillard is turning 31 next month. I think we all agree he's still a top 10 player and a guy who's coming off an MVP caliber season. And yeah, the best thing for Damian Lillard arguably could be somewhere else where he's got a better chance to win a championship immediately. But I'm not sure it's the best thing for the Portland Trailblazers, because trying to replace a guy at his level is nearly impossible. They're not going to be able to do it. Now, if they had to, if it came to that, if they decided this is the time to do it, or if he said it's the time to do it, could you get Ben Simmons, perhaps, if the Sixers flame out? Could you get a Jaylen Brown or a Brandon Ingram plus some of the Pelicans' cache of draft picks? And by the way, none of those guys are as good as Damian Lillard, but at least you could potentially have a young star to build around. And if they're going to go down that path, and again, I don't think they should, but you have to start there. It's got to be some combination of an existing young all-star who's got many years left at that level and draft picks, but I'm still not doing it.
Well, Ben, I'll put this back to you. I mean, the teams that have been proactive, and there's only a handful of them, have benefited, at least in terms of how they're shaped for the future. I mentioned Boston. How about Oklahoma City? I mean, Oklahoma City dealt Paul George when his value was still high and got back Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's going to be a franchise cornerstone there for years to come. And for that deal and other deals, they have got about more draft picks than anybody over the next 6 years. So I don't know, man. Like, at some point, you've got to kind of look at your team and say, are we going to be a championship team in the next 3 years? I think you can make a stronger case, Ben, that the Blazers window for that has closed more than the case you can make that it's still open.
Yeah, I mean, the West is certainly deep, and there's a number of teams, Phoenix, Utah, who are up and coming and have solidified themselves, I think, for years to come. But I would just push back on even that Oklahoma City example because, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ever going to be a centerpiece the way that Damian Lillard is, right? If Shai even gets to, close behind Damian Lillard, I think that's a success. But I doubt he really gets to that level, and who knows about all these draft picks. And I would say that, I wouldn't be shocked if in 5 years, 8 years' time, Oklahoma City is in kind of the same situation that Portland and so many other teams around the league are in, right? They have a franchise star who is really, really good, top 10, top 5, whatever you want to call him, MVP caliber, but maybe not going to win a championship. We've seen this with a number of franchises historically. Think about Allen Iverson and the Sixers, right? They had their one real opportunity to win a title, and then they ended up cutting bait, right? And so maybe Damian Lillard will just go down as this franchise star, this centerpiece, who will go down without having won a championship. We all just might have to accept that. But if I'm Portland and their management, I'm still trying to build around him and try and make that not come to fruition.
Look, if they had beaten Denver and got beat in the second round, I might agree with you. I might say, all right, you just bring Zach Collins back, make a couple of tweaks, you're right there. But they lost to Denver with the Nuggets down their second best player, like an all-star caliber guy in Jamal Murray. I don't know how you look at the way this season ended and say they're just a tweak or two away from getting to the highest level. If you're fine with that, if just having Damian Lillard around and keeping him in Portland till the end of his career, regardless of the outcome of each season, okay, like that's a perfectly fine position to take. But if you're championship driven, your best chance long-term of winning a championship, I think, is strongly exploring what the market might look like for Damian Lillard. For more, check us out over at SI.com.